Hear that sound? That's the future knocking on your door. Gear up for an unprecedented experience with HomeBrew AI. An electrifying community of brainiacs, AI enthusiasts, digital alchemists, and knowledge seekers. This is where fellowship intermingles with creativity. Build bridges with fellow trailblazers, plunge into intellectual odysseys, and let your synapses jive to the cadence of progress. We're embarking on an ambitious endeavor to chronicle the singularity. So head over to HomeBrew AI, where the news is hot, the ideas are brewing in the singularity. Well, that's for you to find out.
Okay, Johnny. Everything good?
Yeah, let me get comfortable here.
I spam tab on my thing. That was weird. Okay. Anyways, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm getting settled in and checking out my course load for this law program I'm in, and it's quite intensive. It's a 3-year program in 1 year. So I'm going to be not playing video games, not watching any anime, not really doing anything besides working out and studying law.
Okay. Let me know if you need any help with language models. No particular reason. Not related. Not related to that. Anyways.
No, you can use them. You can use them, right?
Okay.
They gave a whole class on it. They gave a whole lecture actually on the ethical ways to use it. So like, if I need to like disseminate information from like a case file, because the way that English courts work, and this is why LLMs are great, is that the law is predicated on 2 things: previous judicial rulings, and the higher the court, then that's the one that you go with. So like, if there's no specific law, or if the legislation's old, a judge of a high court can be like, actually, nope, this is not allowed anymore. And the judge will rule in a case, and then other judges and then other solicitors, barristers will then cite that as basically law. Like, look what this has been decided here. So like an LLM's perfect for that, because you just take all that, train it off of all that data. It's perfect.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. But so to get into a few things here, because we're now the one thing we're going to need is some sort of mic for you real soon, because the timeline for our podcast here just got shifted significantly. So I couldn't set this up now, and it's okay that we couldn't set it up just generally because I'm not the most prepared. But what I will say is that timeline shifted significantly because Kick just got rug pulled. Elon just tweeted earlier before I started.
How earlier?
So Elon just tweeted earlier that a couple hours ago, I think, reposting a Twitter video of how, if you are a premium subscriber to X.com, there is now a studio with stream keys and stuff set up to live stream. So we will be able to live stream this directly from Twitter, and that'll help infinitely with discovery. So that's what we'll be doing. We maybe should sit down and talk about a mic for you. Ramzik got a pretty good one for how cheap it was.
Really?
It's pretty decent. So we could do something like that. Just something you can use for this, just so you have a piece of equipment. And then
right,
we will probably end up streaming this channel Twitter. And that's how we're going to do it. From here on out, we'll stop streaming on Kick. My point is, Kick just got rug pulled.
What do you mean when you say, if I understand rug pulling, and terms of coin, how
Not talking in
that
terms of
functions.
coin. Rug pull is literally just
Yeah.
a rug gets pulled out from under you. Someone just fucked you.
All the funding's done.
No, I'm saying they got rug pulled by X, meaning X is just like, oh, we're going to do streaming now. Why the fuck would you stream anywhere else?
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay.
So there you go.
I thought
That's
you
what,
meant financially rug pulled.
no. It would be funny. Trainer X runs off with all the money. Something funny. No, nothing like that.
I was like, holy shit.
But yeah, the point is X now is moving into supporting streaming. So we will be able to do the live version of this. We'll stream the Discord call straight to it. And that's going to be the goal moving forward, is to get on there. Viewership may go up, may not go up. We'll see. But that's what we'll be doing. And then Twitter Spaces needs a lot of work still. It's fucking garbage. You can't host from your...
So,
go ahead.
One thing, I'm hoping that Elon, when he makes the X streaming platform within X, obviously, that he doesn't do it like Twitter Spaces is done. Because from what I understand, Twitter Spaces is still just kind of like people I'm following, if they're involved in it, or if they're in the audience, or like people that are kind of semi-adjacent. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that it's a lot closer to standard Twitch, where there's categories and stuff, and you know what I mean, and that way people can find stuff even if they're not following them, even if they have no mutuals or mutuals of a secondary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, basically, you're gonna want both of those. Like it's gonna need both.
Yeah.
So people following you see that you're streaming automatically. But then
it's social media first and foremost, and Twitch is not that.
So they're probably gonna have both to some degree. There was kind of a creator studio like layout that kind of looks like the Twitch thing you're talking about. So it'll probably be a little bit of both, and it's going to be pretty much competition's going up in the streaming space, and X.com is putting its hand in there. We've talked a lot about just the development as time goes on of X and how they're doing things. But yeah, so that is like an official, we can do this now. Hold on.
The good news is that we've sort of been doing this for a little while. So we're not the most polished, obviously, but got a little experience. And what happens when a new streaming platform starts is you have some big names, right? You'll always have big names that either A, were on that platform, which is going to be the case now, that are already on Twitter that are like, I'm going to do streaming now. And they're always going to get a good audience. But you're going to have a lot of schlock, a lot of garbage, a lot of people, because the reason a lot of people don't stream is because it's like, well, I don't have any viewers. It's so hard. People are just watching the big names. They're just watching the Asmon Golds and the Bikini Girls and, what have you. But if it's new, Wild West, everyone's looking for new content creators kind of thing, then people are going to feel like now's my time to shine. And I think what that does is it puts people who are a step above in a position where they actually look like they're much better content creators than they might be because of how shit everybody else is.
Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable listening to a lot of those spaces, to be honest. They're a little strange. You can tell that they're tweeters, like they're good at tweeting. Not to say I'm the best at talking, but I think I can do better. But yeah,
I'm one of the best talkers.
Yeah, but
one of the greatest.
But anyways, so this is good news, is that we can move into this, and then Discovery is just better, just straight up on X. Like, it'll be better for the both of us. So we'll be working on that. By the way, on the law front, I do have a friend who I did some mild consulting for free, unfortunately, but on setting up large language models locally, but they're working on like a law related thing where they'll be fine-tuned and
Well,
pre-trained on law, and all the
it's
data
good
needs to be
because
local. All the data needs to be local and private because it's legal stuff. So basically, I know of a company right now that I've done a little bit of help from a distance. There's a possibility that I get brought on long term, but yeah, like language models are moving into law related stuff, helping with the drafting of things and paralegal stuff, and even just parsing through the info, feeding you the laws and citations, all kinds of stuff.
yeah, I don't think that LLMs are at a point where AI is not at a point where I think it's going to be as effective as someone who is very good in the field when it comes to qualitative, subjective reasoning. It can pass the bar, but the bar is a little bit different than arguing it's a little bit different. A logic problem is not necessarily subjective extrapolation, right? But anything that's quantitative data or anything that is understanding what happened in the court case and then taking that and then sort of like applying it, that kind of stuff, I think. Good.
Well, real quick on a comment on that is that especially for local models, because you can't locally host GPT models, you can't make them completely 100% private. So that's a problem for places like this, protecting your own data. But there is a model called Orca, and I've talked about it before, but it has certain things that it outperforms GPT-4 on. And when fine-tuned, it can outperform GPT-4 on very specific tasks. And now you've got Microsoft is looking into replacing certain parts of Azure where they have GPT 4 as a part of their service. They're putting Orca, or they're working on like putting Orca, like fine-tuned Orca models into it, because it can do what GPT-4 can do in that certain task at about 1/10 of the price. So you're getting this is an open source model that's outperforming obviously on certain metrics. So, and fine tuning is always going to help with performance on very specific tasks. So we're headed towards the world where large language models are going to be integrated into everything you can fucking think of. There's no avoiding
Absolutely.
this.
Yep. And speaking of the non-avoidal, which is the path that we're down, because I was talking about this, if we actually wanted to do regulatory legislation and make sure that everything goes through really smoothly, we should have been doing it maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And the point of no return, like let's say AI ends up being like a bad deal, right? Let's just say because there is a chance, right? But like
Of course.
I was explaining because a lot of the people in my field, they're not scared that they're going to lose their jobs. They don't care about that, right? They're intelligent enough to not really worry about the economic side of things, because that is a very low, like it's a soundbite issue, not an actual threat to anything, because there will always be, and for the time being, something comes up that will take care of that for the people that lose their jobs to technology, right? We'll figure something out. I guess their fear more is like, okay, if we're going to go the open source route, then that means like everyone's going to have access to that. And that's a terrifying thing to them. And I told them like the point of no return was in the 90s for us as a species, right? Like that was the 90s, right? Once we decided we are an information technology society, point of no return. It may be in the 70s or the 80s we could have said, hey, we're actually going to move away from that. But 90s and onward, our entire world is constructed around information technology. And so to try to separate that now would destroy everything that we have. So we have to be full committal on this. There's no other route. We have to be fully committed. Well, it's not even that we have to be, it's that we are, right? It doesn't matter if you like it or not. We've been full committal.
We're all in.
And that's they're very scared. They're freaked out. They think this could be the end. They think like the end. I mean, it's
The
not
end is near every
impossible.
10 years. There's always someone with a doomsday story. I mean, when I was younger, the 2012 thing used to scare the shit out of me. I was just a kid. I was like, people keep saying it's going to end now. And I remember as that whole year passed, that was like a thing on my mind, you know? And it's, you don't know for sure, but you're like, this could happen. But the point is, you have...
I would Cold War, Cuban Missile Crisis.
I wonder to what degree that, like, have there always been doomsday cults like throughout like history? Because I know of a few, obviously, but other than like, you know, the concept of like the rapture, right? I think
so. As far
I
as
think the Cold War probably added a lot to our kind of cult of personality. At any point it could end. At any point the world could end. So that's why we like have that like culturally in us from that era where it was really true.
Before then, it would be like Black Death, Black Plague, like Spanish flu going through, killing everyone. Like I would say a lot of the death cult sort of, revelations, here it is either A, from a religious standpoint because of just mortality, you know what I mean, that we're gonna die, so then we're all gonna die kind of thing. Then would be like disease and famine once we had societies that were interconnected enough to where it could wipe out mass populations. But even then, I think for the most part, the average person in the back of their head was like, okay, well, it could kill a lot of us, right? But it won't kill all of us. But then during like the Cuban Missile Crisis, we're like, oh shit, we could literally kill all of us. Like not just most of us, not 99% of us, not 99, but we could kill 100% of
it
every
came down to the wire.
Yeah. So we've been that close before, and we just got lucky because I don't believe in divine intervention.
Basically, the idea is that like there's always the possibility, and it's always true, and it's just because someone has a new theory doesn't mean it's not true. That the world could end at any moment, and that's just kind of the way it works. That's the stakes of life, so to speak, for all of
absolutely
right now. But further, I wanted to talk about very specifically is we have some big developments this week, but the biggest like elephant in the room type thing that I do want to talk about, like just right away, is holy shit. We have lost so much progress in the past 6 months from OpenAI not releasing GPT Vision as soon as they could have. I don't know how much you've been paying attention to it. I know you've been busy as hell.
Yep.
But it is incredible. This thing can see. It like I have seen I saw one where it's a dude takes a piece of some really well prepared chicken or something. It's got different spices on it, and it basically is like, how do I make this? It looks at the chicken with the rosemary or whatever the hell's on it, right? Various spices and the way it's cooked, even it can tell how it's cooked, and it generates a recipe list and how to cook it to make it look like that, just from vision. And then there's even another. There's a bunch of examples I can give, but we're headed towards Foom. Are you aware of the concept of Foom?
No.
The concept of Foom and AI is that eventually you reach a point where you tip over, right? And now the AI is so advanced that it starts self-improving. And then within a couple of days, you got Foom, or however, very short timeline. Foom. Boom. Now we're in the post-scarcity artificial super intelligence is around, it improved itself so much in like 5 months, whatever it is. We're headed towards Foom, and it's this vision stuff is unlocking that. So to speak further on it, there is a scene description of the movie Inception. Of it's just on paper, and it's this crappy like notes or whatever, but it's got flowcharts and showing how the scenes of the movie are going to play out. Not once does it mention Inception on the piece of paper. And, you know, there's English handwriting on it. It's not like text. And someone showed it to GPT Vision, and it broke down and figured out that it was from the movie Inception. Just from looking at a picture of notes of how the director wrote how the scenes are going to play.
That's interesting.
So here's the example of Foom that I can make. Somebody posted a thing where it tells GPT-4, gives a screenshot of the Google homepage. Hey, make a modern version of the Google homepage. And then it sends it back. It gives it this like blue tint background. It looks kind of interesting, right? A little more like futuristic, but I wouldn't say I like the aesthetic. But the person then kept taking and showing what the new version looks like every time as it edits the HTML in the background. So it is able to look at an image and go, oh, this needs padding here. This needs to go here. This doesn't look right. This color is too dark or too bright. And it can self-iterate its own code just from seeing an image of how the output looks. This is a major deal. And this is my point of like,
it's just not able to internally do it yet.
Automatically.
And it's not able to do it on itself. Yeah.
So obviously it runs out of a context window and stuff like that. And you need to work around the fact that it doesn't have enough memory to do this on a long form thing. But the point is we are closing in on Foom, where this thing can look at what it did, decide how to make it better, and keep going. Iteration.
When do you think we'll reach a point where we no longer are bound by like context windows, where like I can just say to it, I can take like 40 terabytes, 50 terabytes, 200 terabytes of just data, and I can just be like, I need you to analyze all this, and I need you to do this, this, and this.
I would say that's probably a RAM problem more than anything. I'm not an expert on foundational models. I know enough about how they work, but effectively it either depends on us reaching a new method or reaching a point of compute that we can host significantly more. Basically, the text gets broken down into tokens, and then these tokens process, and that's how you get your output, right? So it's completing the next. I've explained this before, but your prompt requests of the model whatever you request, and then it's told based on this and all text information before that you have seen, generate an output that is like satisfactory here. So it's more or less predicting what the best response to this prompt is, right? And over time with RLHF, that gets better, and there's a few other methods that are being worked on. But basically, right now the problem is a tokens to attention ratio. So how many tokens can we process, but also maintain a good amount of attention, so that it can understand the full concept. So if they give you one sentence, it's perfectly fine handling all of that, and it'll take into account the entire sentence. Add a paragraph, perfectly pays attention to the whole paragraph. Add a couple of paragraphs, pays perfect attention still. Add another set of paragraphs, depending on the model you're using. That's when the attention starts to falter. It starts not being able to take into account every little thing. So effectively, we need to reach a point where the attention is as perfect as possible with the new methods that are being developed, as well as the main bit now is more or less quality of data from at least what Emod's talking about. So basically having perfect data. And then now there's rumors like Gemini is trained on a significant amount of synthetic data as well. So you're using...
What do you mean when you say synthetic data?
I'm using a language model to generate perfect data or really good data.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm generating responses to questions, right? And I'm filtering those to make sure that those large language model responses are as perfect and accurate as possible. So that gives it really good outputs as examples to go off of. And when it's trained into the model itself, the better the data, the less weird crap that comes out. You could...
hallucinations and stuff like that, or just general errors?
General errors. So it's a lot.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Do we know what the hallucinations? What is the actual cause of that, or is it more of like a guess?
Hallucinations are more or less a solvable problem technically, but the current state of how they work is that it needs to put text here that looks right. That's all it's thinking about doing. So this is why GPT-3 had a significant amount more hallucination, because it was significantly more simple than GPT-4 is. Less data, less. Now you have GPT-4 is like more or less like multimodal, and then it's also multi-agent system. So it's like you have your law agent, your this agent, your mathematician. You know, it's not perfect like that, but they have more or less a bunch of models kind of working together that were all trained within the same data set. But you more or less fine tune an expert for each thing. And then that expert is called as the question is being answered. So basically this creates less hallucination because your math model is not also your English model, right? So your English model is pretty good at weaving words together. So it can make something that sounds right, but it's bullshit. This is a problem in code. You can look, code looks perfectly fine at a glance, but then you look closer and it's putting functions in that don't exist within that code language. But the problem is it has functions that do sometimes it'll put functions that do exist in, say, JavaScript, in C# or something like that to give you like a vague explanation. So it'll try to do another language.
Looking to put something correct there.
Say that again.
You said it's looking to put the correct thing there. It needs to fill that space.
Yeah, so it's filling the space with the tokens that it's putting out. So hallucination is effectively this. It's like an artifact of all the text that it has, especially when it doesn't really have the answer. And sometimes it doesn't have the answer just because its attention is failing. So you can have the full context window and it will output the wrong thing. And you immediately can see that it's the wrong thing and it's just making something up. And that's because in that moment, even though it has the full context window, its attention failed for this block of text where this sentence wasn't picked up, or it didn't take it into attention when it started generating out it's a very like complicated process. Honestly, it's strange because even like prompt engineering, even your grammar, like where your commas are, where your periods are, whether or not you misspelled a word can honestly affect an outcome to a large degree of how the language model responds to you. They even did like a study where like the more polite you are to GPT, the better the responses. If you're a fucking dick, it sucks. So
if you're just like stupid little fucking machine, I'll fucking kill you. And tell me this.
so
The response would be
the general point that I lost in the thread there is that getting a larger context window is largely reliant on attention. So we're, like I said, it could be a general like processing thing where the more video RAM that we can put to this task, the better we might get as far as context windows, because you can run larger and larger models with higher quality synthetic data, you name it. But there are also theories that the 100K context window that Claude uses is not entirely 100K context. Like it might be some tricks to that, where it might be chunking it down, summarizing itself to each other. Who knows exactly how they're doing it? Again, all this shit is like closed source, so even the Anthropic people, they're kind of running it like a. If you've ever heard people's anecdotes on how parts of secret facilities in American, military research and development work is like, you'll be working on something and you have no clue what the rest of the bigger picture of what you're working on. They're just like, we need you to make this particular T joint, this weight, this tensile strength, you name it. Right?
And they're using it to like poison children in another country. And you had no idea.
Okay, whatever. The point is that you don't know the bigger picture of the thing that you're working on.
A lot of the people that are working specifically in like the weapons development sometimes don't know like exactly, especially if they're in the engineering department of like stuff, they might not actually know exactly what it is they're working on. I've heard people been like, and then it was used for something not like not like the Oppenheimer where it's like,
This is how Anthropic currently works. No one person knows everything about how it all works. Yeah. At least this is what the CEO said on a podcast. But we're headed towards the possibility of detokenization, where we like run into a new method where it has nothing to do with tokens. I don't know how that works. I've just heard Karpathy talk about the possibility of this, or eventually you're just going to be able to feed data just like you're talking about. And all it needs to do is process through it all. So it's more of a bandwidth issue. Yes. So that is pie in the sky future. But as time goes on with attention as the problem that we need to solve for, that makes whether or not, because that's effectively what you do, right? You fine tune your model and you realize that 2K tokens is fine, right? But the second you try to process 4K tokens with that model, it starts fucking hallucinating random outputs, right? That's effectively why you only have up to 4K on GPT-4 on ChatGPT. Well, granted, they're doing that for expenses, by the way, of course.
I think one of them did like 500,000 token or something.
There is. So if you look at the line graph on that, it's as it gets out to, I believe that was called Long Llama. As it gets out to about 100K tokens, the attention of it's dropping, and then it goes drops a lot out at 500K. So this is it can only pay attention to so much is the problem. So they're doing a pretty interesting method, obviously, to actually achieve what they achieved. You could still use it and get some good use out of it. But the point is, past like 250K tokens, it starts hallucinating a ton, or it starts not being able to pay attention to various parts of it. So you feed it this entire book, right? That's worth, there's a Python book that I have on, well, it's a bunch of like tips and tricks for Python, right? Very long book. And you can't feed it into Claude because it has roughly 400k tokens above that. If I fed that entire thing into the Long Llama or even certain billion or million token context models, right? It would miss pieces of it because it didn't properly pay attention to that moment, right? So it when you're asking it questions that would pertain to that part of the book within that prompt, it would have to output something, but it wouldn't know what was there. So there would be gaps.
It's having a hard time looking through everything.
Yeah. It turns out it's really hard to read a book all at once. That's what we're teaching these things to do effectively. Is the irony is how big of a book can I feed you and you perfectly hit this quiz? Because even Claude has issues with certain things like this where there's times when I run podcast scripts through it and Claude will effectively whiff the the who is talking to who scenario, where even if you explain which speaker is which in a diarized transcript, which is separated speakers in the transcript, so it's showing like say Joby Fi and Johnny, right, as the two speakers, and it's showing their transcript and how their conversation went. It will sometimes confuse who said something because the moment where that transcript cuts off, it lost the attention. So I've seen it literally say that itself, Claude, was in the conversation. So it'll hallucinate that Claude was saying this to Johnny, for example. And it's like, no, that was
jealous, wants to be a part of the podcast.
Yeah, but in reality, it was Joby saying that. So there's a ton of like flaws.
It's
you know what? You want to just do the fucking podcast with Claude? You go right ahead.
No, yeah. If you show up one day and like you just like aren't able to really show emotion really well, and you like just acting like very strange, I'm like Claude killed him, and Claude is like projecting this like VR VTuber version of you.
Well, yeah. So the point is it's more of just an engineering problem right now, which largely is revolved around data.
Well, right?
What's that?
It's a memory problem because it can't access that effectively like a human being can, right? Like if you gave me because there are human beings that can read a book and you could be like, what happens on page 21 and like on the fourth line, and they boom, it's instant, you know? So it is feasible within the human brain to accomplish that. You know, that Rain Man, right? Like if you think of like what he's capable of, obviously he's less capable of other things, but within the from a standpoint of that, it is a memory can function that way, at least in a biological sense.
So we're basically attempting to give these things photographic memory within a context window, is what you're explaining. And yeah, so as time goes on, we will extend the level of attention to tokens ratio. So it's a rough thing where we're probably like a year. Here's the irony: is we're probably only 2 to 3 years out from a legitimate million plus token model, and that would be 750,000 words, roughly. So you could feed any book into that for the most part, and eventually it's going to have near 100% attention. We want 100% attention. There's a few different methods that are going into this as well, where we might eventually get 100% attention.
Mm-hmm.
So 100% attention is ideal for any sort of data analysis thing. Like you're sending it terabytes of data, right?
Yep.
And eventually we will get there, but it's rough right now. And
Well, do you think in 2 or 3 years that we might even be beyond the token
I
of
think
using it
that
anyway?
I think that it'll either be that we find a way to do it tokenless, or we reach a point where the tokens don't matter anymore.
Because I can't imagine LLMs are the future of AI. I mean, because at least in their current iteration, there's just too many. How do I put this? It just seems that there are far too many obstacles to growth within the way that we currently have LLM set up.
I think the obstacles to growth right now are mainly to do with compute, where we don't have enough computers to train even bigger models, as well as computers. Like, because I mean, someone working on something is the maker of Doom and Quake, which is why is his name escaping me right now?
It's
Carmack, John Carmack. He mainly had a tweet a while back where it was basically talking about, while training a model, a GPU's dying, stalling out the training. So sometimes these training sessions that they're doing for these models that they're tuning
just
could
eating
have
through.
could have a moment where it fails because of some unforeseen circumstance with the hardware itself. So there might even be flaws within the models because of this, because we can't go through all the models yet and understand exactly how all the math is working. It's only the smaller models we're able to do that on. So when there are flaws in a bigger model, we don't know why right now.
Layman.
Say that again.
Me being the layman, do you think that the math is really all that different on some of these larger models as some of the smaller ones? Like realistically, is it?
Picture it like a tree, right?
Okay.
The trees are bigger. It's that simple. The flow chart for how it like Planck goes down, right, is significantly more complicated. Yep, Plinko. Think about that. That's kind of how it works. And based on the equations as it's going down, it eventually reaches the output. And that's how they effectively work right now in a explaining like the physical math of it.
Because of the context window and because of the memory issue, that's why we don't have LLMs that are self-programming at all, right? It's not really.
Basically, because the way that you would have self-programming language models is eventually that they would be able to go and look at their own weights. They would have full, which might be a catabolic issue, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure, but the ability for a language model in the future to go and look at the weights of itself, see how all the math works, take all of that attention into context, and then it would be able to effectively, with the data set and weights compared, it would effectively be able to program itself. We no longer need fine tuning or training in the traditional sense of how we do it now. The language model literally just starts updating the code that it works off of, which is a potential eventually. That's when you get real foam, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. So, obviously in the end, it's upwards trend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do you think it's feasible then, if we have these hallucinations and these errors that pop up when we first allow it to do that, there's any scenario where it codes itself shittier on accident?
Well, the lucky scenario is that it's going to be very much like a natural selection scenario where it will,
So even if you step forward, one backwards.
Well, the program wise, especially like technology, it's going to be a eugenic type thing. We love that word here. I'm kidding, but the point is, like, it will literally be able to do unit tests and experiments on itself from changing different parts of that tree within the weights, for example, and see how it starts responding to things. So this all will take a ton of fucking compute of it prompt engineering back into itself and reiterating on its new model that it just designed.
So let's say that me and you personally, right? We had access to ChatGPT's tree, as you used as an analogy. And we were able to do some finagling with its context window so that we could fit that within its context window without too much loss of attention. And we were doing it, and we weren't, no one else has access to it. They're not open, whatever. Do you think then we would be able to take that, train it ourselves, and have it then train itself?
Not in current times, no. There would,
Okay.
it would not be able to pay attention to enough of it. Okay, so it's like there's all these fucking math equations that are all really complicated algorithms. Like some people have been showing like smaller models where they break down, they're able to take these algorithms for like very simple math stuff that the model's being asked, right? And it will create a ton of different algorithms for how to do something that you would say 2 + 2 is 4, right? That's your algorithm. For the large language model within this context, it's a ton of different math steps to get to 2 + 2 = 4 when it's asked that question. So it's this really inefficient process that comes to the right output within what I'm trying to describe to you. So it's like think of you ever see like like a college math board or something, right, with all the equations on it.
And the NSS 3.
Okay, so the point is like a lot of them are like that within the context of how this math actually works. The people talk about the current thing is that within programming, it's an if or statement. Is how these language models work. It's this long line of if this, then that, and then eventually it comes to your output down the tree. So it's this very complicated and genuinely inefficient process right now. That's why it's so expensive compute-wise. We're kind of brute forcing AI in its current state. It really is this kind of strange effect that this is how it worked out. But my general point is that to get the 2 + 2 = 4, it's this massive complicated part of the tree. And eventually we'll be able to optimize these parts of the tree. But the point is we're only able to break this down on really small models on how this math that the training and fine tuning comes out to, right? Where once you get to the point where you can pay attention to the full model, then it can take all the math equations with the data on the back end that the model runs off of. Once it can do that, then it will be able to understand exactly how this machine works, because we don't know how it works. Like it's kind of like Google, right? There is not a single person on earth that knows how all of Google's code base works. There are people that are experts in certain parts of the code. And that's kind of what we can do with smaller large language models, is understand how just a tiny portion of it works. But because we can't pay attention as humans to the entire thing, we don't know how exactly it works. It's this massive, complicated Planko tree. You're kind of like we're pretty good at creating the outcome we want now, according to OpenAI, as far as the data that we train on. But as far as the underlying canals and stuff that all the rivers of electricity flow down within this language model to reach whatever outcomes are happening during the prompt to output process, we genuinely don't know how it works. So until we can get the context model that wide, now it's probably going to happen with smaller models first, but you'll eventually be able to recode them. So I hope I explained that properly. It's, again, some of my information could be slightly inaccurate, of course, because again, we don't know exactly how they all work, but as far as my understanding, that's more or less how it works.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm a
basically,
layman, so
I know. Extending the context window is,
it's a
by the way,
complicated
something we
process.
need. We
Yeah,
need
but
it.
it's necessary.
Yeah, we need it beyond everything else, because once you get to like millions of context window with really high or perfect attention, so you don't need perfect attention, by the way, because the model, once it has enough information, let's say it's only 92% attention, the other 8%, it can fill in those gaps with significant accuracy because it's intelligent, right? So unless it's something specific to the book or something, it doesn't necessarily need to, how to say, be perfect. But the closer to perfect, the better, obviously. So
Yeah, sure.
Eventually, once you get to millions of contexts, you're going to be able to get a model that can improve at least code. So it will just keep reiterating on a program until it's perfect. And, well, no program's perfect technically, but yeah, that's what it can do. So that's when we'll reach FOOM, and then you'll be able to automatically set up that process within certain context windows.
So with that,
Okay, go ahead.
that would add another exponential growth rate, right?
Yeah, the larger context one. Like if we all had,
It's already exponential growth upon exponential, right?
Mhm.
And this
Yeah.
would be exponential growth upon exponential growth upon exponential growth.
Well, you got to think it's like if I had millions of context window, right? I can clean data faster. So I can generate better synthetic data, and then I can also clean data better.
So this like 6-month period or what have you that we've really seen. Let's say like what would you say about the AI boom that we're really in at the moment? What would you say about 8 months, 9 months, maybe like a year?
Let's say a year total.
Right. But so within video generation, that was like a 7 or 8 month thing, I think, between the first gen of that model. I can't remember which one it was. And then the second one. But that's going to start picking up. Do you think within the next 2 years that'll be like a 3 month difference now? Or
Well, now we've got Dolly 3, which is more steerable. Dolly 3 isn't completely out yet, but it is the top of the line image thing, and apparently Midjourney has some stuff coming, but we don't know how good it's going to be. But it's entirely
those are the
possible
two
that
big
Dolly 3 might have just blown it out of the water. It can do English pretty damn well on signs and stuff. It also takes language into account way better. So I posted one in the chat where it's effectively it's like a descriptive aerial view of archaeologists finding a dragon fossil sky, like a top down view of the fossil in the ground as the archaeologists are like digging it. And it's not meant to be like super realistic because of the way the prompt works. But what'd you say?
Where did you post that?
It's in the general.
Okay, I'll check the general. That's real.
Well, the point is you could make it more realistic just with better prompt engineering, but that is beyond steerable as far as like getting it to do that. But my point is with the video models,
People are also very scared of image generation. They're fucking freaked.
how much have you like talked to like the layman, so to speak, on image generation?
I've mostly been talking to what I would consider reasonably intelligent people who do not have a background in tech, but have a background in law. Or there's maybe one or two people that were scared that I think had a background in STEM. And one of the things like, well, what are you going to do when someone generates a hyper realistic false flag attack and then they put it out there? What's your solution to that? And I'm like, oh,
This is honestly,
I don't believe anything you
probably,
see on the internet.
this is probably the scariest part about it is the thing I'd mentioned before. Like once the election season comes, where we have full technology to completely fake shit that Trump's saying, fake stuff that Biden's saying, fake stuff that any political candidate is saying anywhere in the world.
Biden, you said video of Biden where he kicked that baby 40 times.
Yeah, it's gonna be stuff like that where it's like, holy shit, can you believe Trump like was stomping on them like that? That was weird. And then it's gonna be like a full it's
he
the weirdest
shot that
part.
guy.
The weirdest part is that it's going to look completely realistic. So we're gonna have to have this like mental
I don't think he'd do
split.
that. I don't think
We're gonna have to have this mental split in our head. We're just it's don't believe your lying eyes, right? Where
well, what if they come out and they go, that was not real, that was a deep fake, or you know?
well, it's not
I
even
didn't do that.
the video of him saying it's not real could be fake, and then someone reveals it as fake for fun. You know, like there's levels of there's layers to all this.
If I don't see it in person, that's the one reason I'm not too keen. I'm not too keen on getting chipped yet. Right. I'm not going to be the first iteration because right now, the only thing that I certainly can trust, because I'm a mentally sound individual, I don't have any schizo disaffective delusions. Luckily, I am a crazy person, but not a delusional person. I don't have a visual or auditory hallucinations, I should say. I think I probably am a little delusional sometimes. I'm like, oh, I could do this. Like the joke about how all men think that they could land like a 747 jet.
Yeah.
Like that might be me being delusional, right? But I don't have visual or auditory hallucinations at all. And so then if I was right in front of Joe Biden and you know what I mean? And he was like, I didn't say that. Then he'd be like, okay.
You want me to do you one better? You might have to get the chip because people can project shit into your brain at some point. So you need a literal defense.
I think I'm just out. I'm out after that.
My point is
shield my walls. Can I not wear a tinfoil hat? Like unironically?
I actually wanted to talk about this a little bit. I heard someone talking about in a space, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna go. So someone in
a drink.
Okay, hey, let's take a little break for just a second.
Yeah, because this is fun. This is
Johnny boy.
I'm back.
What is that in your mouth?
Toothpick.
Okay, so
more like a dental floss thing, but
let's talk about the concept of a Faraday cage. I heard someone on a Twitter space recently talking about basically wanting to get someplace out in the middle of nowhere, and then you got like a big room with a Faraday cage, right? Mm-hmm. Faraday cage is no signals can get in and out. You can't, like your cell phone won't have a reception in there. The concept is like I cover myself in this material and the government can't put stuff in my brain. Now, I think that this is a flaw in thinking that most people tend to have where how do you know that they're not going to be able to indirectly or directly get past your Faraday cage? So this is my point about the concept.
Make it full of lead.
The concept is that you're probably going to need a Neuralink at some point that works for you, right? It's your defender, brain-wise. Because if they get to the point where we can project shit into your brain, I mean, there's like a patent for McDonald's or something to that effect. They can put commercials in your brain. I don't know if this is a fucking joke, but even if it
Well,
is a
a
joke.
patent does. I've seen stuff on it, but it was like I think it was due to the radiation of tube televisions. Is what one of the patents when it comes to like actually changing or like putting like changing bioelectrical signals in the brain. There's a patent for that, but it only works. It's not with like the computer. The light that's coming out of this is not, it's a little bit different. So you kind of got to parse out what's real, what's not. But I mean, if I create something in the style of not letting Superman X-ray vision see into my room, right? They do that in the comic books all the time, right? He can't see in because it's made of like,
X-ray technically works
one.
now.
What would penetrate that?
Penetrate what? A Faraday cage?
No, if I enclosed myself in lead. Because as far as like,
Nothing we
new
currently have.
technologies, well, as far as new technologies, if anything on the not visible light, but the whole spectrum of wavelength, right? If I make something that's pretty much impenetrable except for like neutrinos and um, there's another thing that we have to go down like 4 miles deep. Comes from deep space to measure, right? Like if those are like the only things that are able to penetrate, and those are not things that are big enough for us to like produce in a way that interacts with us, because at that point they're too small, right? They're too small to actually interact with us. They pass right through us. We have like a million of them that pass through us. It doesn't do anything. It collides with nothing, you know? So
Yeah.
that's something they could get to penetrate, but so what? It then wouldn't impact. So I think there are Faraday cages that you can build that are absolutely impenetrable no matter what technology. It's just, did you actually build it correctly?
Okay, so there's two things. Number one is the Faraday cage it's entirely possible we reach the point where it is impenetrable, right? As far as how you're building it, and there's no way the government can ever like get in on your thoughts, or McDonald's can't project commercials into your brain directly, right? But here's the problem. Here's the problem is that if there's no way found out to penetrate those eventually, like it's physically impossible, inference is the problem. Where we were talking earlier about large language models, if I get to that point where I have a large language model that can do billions of trillions of whatever amount of tokens, infinite tokens, and I feed it all the data possible, that all the it's like, okay, I feed it every bit of data on you, you're a predictable person now, right? People are very predictable. So once you get to the point, this is something I talk about a lot, is that eventually there's no such thing as redacted, where anything that is redacted from a document, once all the data for that thing is collected, so let's say every government document there is, suddenly the Mad Libs that you're playing are filled in accurately. So it'll be the same thing. Once you go into your Faraday cage, it goes through all the security cameras throughout the area and finds out
last years, so it knows exactly what you're thinking when you're in there.
Yep. So it also knows who went in the Faraday cage with you based on all the data points that it found that person going towards your thing. They noticed a flight, right? It becomes impossible. Doesn't matter that you went into the Faraday cage. They know what conversation you just had. That's eventually going to be the case. So even if it's physically impossible, unless you live your entire life in a Faraday cage, which even then it might not be possible. The point is, like, I think we're fundamentally headed towards the death of privacy, and the only method of fixing privacy is literally to have some sort of AI on your behalf creating mass noise.
We're a long ways away from that level of because part of the longer it's
not against the Faraday cage in the short term.
In the short term, for the next maybe 15, we can argue yes or no on that, but I'd say for at least 15. But even when it gets to a point where it can predict what you're going to do for the next day, right? All your actions, okay, and it's constantly updating, looking at your brain, so it can predict what you're going to do tomorrow. If you spend 4 days in the Faraday cage, the accuracy of what it's predicting as you extend over the x-axis of time away from it taking information from you, the stability in which it can predict your actions is going to go down and down and down.
Yes, this is a model flaw where the longer uh, the longer the model is out of date, the less accurate it is on predicting something.
You'd have to just like every once in a while spend like 3 or 4 months in a Faraday cage.
Could work, but so
Or
something
like a
else,
year.
or your language model creates, or your AI in the background's creating inference to distract and
Mhm.
privatize everything for you. This is my genuine opinion. At some point, is that
And that would work up until you have something that can parse through literally all of that data and then decide, well, what is what and what is not, that. And then you have to come up with something else.
yeah, so it's a fundamentally, there's an arms race that will never stop in the universe until, I guess, everything's a computer. Then maybe we finally stop having that fight. But yeah, fundamentally my point is like, I think it's like a, the concept of like coping, where like people think they're gonna go and hide in the woods with their Faraday cage. It's just not gonna happen. Go move in the woods because
No.
it's nice out there, right? It's nice to like be by yourself and sufficient, raise
To
your
be
chickens and
honest
stuff like that.
about it, I'm not worried about them figuring out what I'm doing or what I'm most likely to do. I don't want them projecting thoughts into my head. So if I have to wear a Magneto helmet the rest of my life, you know what I mean? And they're like,
Yes.
"Oh, we know based off his behavior and his pupil dilation that he there's a 90% chance that he's going to eat a burger today." Okay, good. Fuck you. Don't care. Don't
Yeah.
care. Predict
Well,
everything I do, right?
that's my point, is like at some point, like
I just
having
don't
your
want to eat
own.
a burger I don't want the 90% chance of me eating a burger because those cocksuckers put it in there, right? Like,
Well, this is my point of like having your own AI agent that defends you, is like if you have it within like Neuralink, right? When it detects the McDonald's logo, it deletes it, and you don't have to deal with that shit. There's no projection into your brain, at least. This is my general point of like, um, to it's impossible to. Okay, here's the attitude that I'm talking about. The attitude of I'm just going to have a Faraday cage, right? Okay, fair enough. There's a bunch of justifications we can have for doing that, but that's not going to protect you, right? Long term. Like there's no protection from this. So your protection, it's fighting fire with fire, which is a real thing we do in like forests and stuff like that. You need to go burn lines in the forest or all the foliage below the trees so that the forest doesn't fully catch on fire. You need to use technology to protect yourself from bad technology. So it's a matter of just, um,
mhm.
guns rights advocates obviously have this concept in their mind. The best way to stop a criminal who has a gun is to also have one. That's now your equalizer. You're on equal ground. So this is ultimately what you're going to have with technology in general, is that you're going to need something just as powerful as the bad actors do. And this is ultimately what AI is going to do for most people, is that it is going to rapidly, at some point, either, the concept of foam is that eventually ASI takes over and now it's in charge, or on an
Mhm.
individual level through open source and stuff like that, everyone effectively has their own AI that is modeled off of them and defends them for the
How
most
far
part.
away is Boom? You even think of what is that, like 2010 year what?
If I had to put a like gun to the head number on it, 5 years, we hit foam.
That's crazy. So the person that was giving the AI ChatGPT talk at the law school I go to, very well respected law school, by the way, no idea how I got in. I guess they must have some people they let in as a joke is what must have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, in 25 years, this is going to be coming for a lot of your jobs. And I was like, 25 years? In 25 years, dude, it won't even be, fuck me, 25 years. fuck me 25 years. I can't even imagine what the world is going to look like in 5 years.
Yes, that's effectively the
Let
problem
alone
you have.
20.
GPT Vision was given a flowchart, right? And it just generates, you send it an image of a flowchart and it generates the code in the background. And it's even like there were parts of the flowchart canceled out with like a red X, and it knew not to build that part of the program because you crossed it out on the whiteboard. So you just draw something, and now the AI creates it. You imagine something into existence. This is not perfect yet, and it will take a while to get to the point where it perfectly codes thing without any with little human intervention, or also little hallucination and mistakes. But effectively, what I'm saying,
I want to get to a point where we have something that is not so intelligent as being ASI, right? Not there yet, but it's intelligent enough to give us a roadmap of how soon this stuff's going to start happening. And I think hopefully that is feasible for an AI within the next year or two, where it's intelligent enough, has a big enough context window, has enough understanding that it can give us more accurate roadmap for the evolution of other AIs than the average person within the field it can. And it can
that's
say,
an
here's the
interesting
most
concept.
likely, because that's important, right? Because we're getting right now we're at the point where it's getting pretty fucking smart. So in like a year or two, some of these LLMs, right, are going to be a lot smarter than us, which is why I'm like, okay, well then what do you think the roadmap is going to look like for this? How many years do you think?
We need to ask the smartest guy in the room, and that's GPT-4 right now.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
unfortunate part is that in its current state, it can't necessarily. Well, it depends how much like
It doesn't
context you
have
give it.
access to, it doesn't have access, at least ChatGPT 4 does not have access to anything past like 2019 or something.
No, it's 2022 now. They've added some data to it.
Mm.
So that's
Very good.
still almost 2 years out of date.
Yeah.
So in general, we're probably getting
I mean, I don't
close.
even know if GPT-5 would be capable of doing that, let's say. I don't even know if that's something that is capable.
See, we're kind of in a weird spot where like we don't know exactly how these AIs are going to until you reach artificial superintelligence. AGI might just be a prompt agent where all it is just a big calculator that just works on
Yeah.
everything. So there
I
might
thought
be
it
a
was
scenario.
God from the future, transcending the fourth projected dimension
I don't
and speaking directly.
go fuck yourself, Johnny.
I do all the time.
I don't need to hear that. The point I'm making is that
Told me to go.
you're frustrating, Johnny.
This guy.
Okay, the point I'm making is that we're we might have the scenario where it's
Stupid.
literally just this inert AI that you feed your input in and it gives you your output, and that's all it does, and you can have it loop on itself and do things automatically, and it's kind of this, it's not really sentient, it's just this perfect calculator is effectively what we might be.
I don't think there's any way to prove sentience.
Yeah, it's the conversations we've had before where effectively it will get so close to sentience that to argue it's not is a fucking waste of your time.
Pointless. But to prove that it is also.
Yeah. Well,
Because prove it first.
yeah, you get to the point where you can't even prove that half of humanity is sentient. So, yeah, depending on where you draw the lines, there's just going to be some hurt feelings.
Or is consciousness just a hallucinatory byproduct of evolution and there is no real sentience? It's just a imagined state It's just a byproduct of Skinner's rat in a box, stimulus in and out, and consciousness is an evolution of just stimulus in and out and genetics interacting in a very sort of powerful and complicated way.
Yeah, the way I've learned about how language models work in general is that it's entirely possible that this actually is consciousness. And we're just a really complicated language model with visual modality and audio modality. So we're, you know,
And smell modality.
what modality?
Smell.
Oh, yeah. Smell. Forgot the smell. Touch as well. So feel. So a few modalities. You know, we can
We need to
teach.
make AI that smell. We need to make
We already have that.
smelly.
It already exists. We have AI that can taste water and tell what spring it came from.
Mm.
I can tell the
I'm
difference.
gonna go to the most advanced AI and just fucking crop dust it. See, oh my god, why did Johnny's entire family die in a drone strike? What was that? He crop dusted an AI that did not like that. There's the most advanced, most sophisticated piece of smelling technology. It could, you know what I mean? The most powerful sense of smell. It was 5 million times more powerful than a dog's sense of smell. This guy went over and he farted on it. He's banned. He's banned from ever working in any laboratory ever again.
Should we just cut this episode short?
I did one joke. One joke.
Okay, yeah. So I wonder if it would actually be offended by that. For the record, it might just examine your shit and be able to tell what we're
I
you
don't
just
think
ate.
there would be any good or positive reaction to it, or
Yeah.
negative. I don't think that it would really internalize it like that. It would be funny if it wasn't.
I've been re-listening to X-Force just for fun because I think the last book's going to come out in December. So it's 16 books together, right? And the AI does get a bit offended when people don't consider it sentient, but in general, it is just kind of refers to us as monkeys, you know? Like it's not very impressed by you. It doesn't really care what you do. It doesn't, you know, it can see you like taking a dump or something, but it doesn't care. You know, like it's not grossed out. There's no like, the AI is just fundamentally that different. It would be like us looking at like rats moving around. Like we're not really like, no one's really judging a rat for how it interacts with other rats. Does that kind of make sense? Unless it's like on a minute, like scientific level, people are just kind of like, ew, rats, if anything. So
Yeah,
there's a degree where like the AI is just
a little rat.
The AI is just fundamentally like that different that, like I said before, it's like inert. It doesn't really care if you fart on it, Johnny.
I don't know, but it would be fun.
It might be the most anticlimactic thing you ever did. It doesn't kill any of your family members. Sure. It doesn't care.
It respected me for it, really.
No, it just tells you what type of cancer you got immediately because it can smell it in you.
Ass cancer? Yeah, ass cancer. Dude, if I have intestinal cancer, I'm absolutely I don't know if you've ever seen someone like die from intestinal cancer. They like take a ton of your bits out, right? They're like, oh, well, it always comes back. It always comes back. And they just keep taking more bits out. But this is not like Adeptus Mechanicus. You don't get better bits. They just they like stitch. So you can't eat anything and you like waste away. I'm like, nah, just shoot me. I can't do it. Horrible way to go. So if the AI says I have ass cancer, I'm assisted suicide very quickly.
Well, the bright side is that we're on the path to curing that within the next 10 years minimum, I think, or maximum. I mean, So maybe your ass cancer goes away. So just something to think about. On the concept of the 25-year thing, how often, like, how many people do you think actually believe that? Like, is that just that group of people, or is this like a wide scale? Like, are people not really aware of how fast things are accelerating? Because the vision stuff is, we
all the
haven't even.
students that I all the students that were very scared of AI and were like, "How can you be so positive about it?" And I was like, "Well, because nothing I can do about it but be positive." Because it is the most important time in human history. Period. End of. The only, except for at the height of the Cold War, that is the only time so far that has actually mattered, that has truly mattered large scale. This is
Yeah.
the second time that something's actually mattered because, like, okay, so let's say this empire collapsed, whatever. Okay, let's say that the Spanish flu killed 80% of the population. Who cares? And we just in another 500 years, right? We'd just be back to where we are. None of it really fucking matters. It's all pointless on the grand scale of the human existence. But Cuban Missile Crisis, AI, those two are fundamentally matter. And so, but they were like, they all were basically like 25 years. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's way too long. It's going to happen way quicker than that. They didn't know. They're like, of course, these older people don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that's what they thought, at least. I mean, I only talked to about 4 or 5 people on that subject, but all 4 or 5 people agreed it would be far faster than that.
Yeah, I think.
But they also thought that there was no place for AI within the judicial system because of the way that we have it set up ethics wise, that taking something that is outside of our ethics, something that is 100%, because the law is not exact. It's very circumstantial and it's extraordinarily subjective. And something that runs on an if this then that, or an equation, that this is great for STEM and it's great for medicine and it's great for all science fields, but something that is so, in their words, not mine, although I too, to some degree, I understand where they're coming from.
Well, there's
That
a
there's no
variance,
place
by
for,
the way, of temperature that you can set. It's a literal number for how creative it can be effectively. So
Mm.
so it's not
In its
necessarily
current
just an if
state,
then that thing.
in its current state, and for the next how many ever years, they don't see a place for it just yet. Now, obviously, if it becomes some super intelligent singularity, whatever, then they're like, okay, sure, then it can be our politicians and our lawyers or whatever. But it's the next, because then 30 years from now is not dangerous, right? 30 or 40 years from now is not necessarily the dangerous part. It's the next 10 years that are dangerous.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we have AI that's smart enough. If it was going to fuck us over, it'd have fucked us over by now.
To be honest, I had a bit of an anecdote of mine. I had a breach on an Amazon account of mine, and it pretty sure it was a token attack based on some software that I had to download some software that you couldn't buy. So it managed to, infect my system and steal the token from my browser. So there was no point at which it had my password, right? It just signed in to my Amazon account. And this is something that happened to Linus Tech Tips recently. They literally just got into their system without a password into YouTube and uploaded crypto scams, But they got into the Amazon account the same way and ordered a very expensive laptop through my my account on a fraudulent, like a stolen credit card. So they didn't even use my credit card. And basically, like, I had this whole like thing where like suddenly Amazon like was their support was like threatening me with like, oh well, you're gonna have to pay for that laptop. And I gave all the context of the situation to GPT-4, and it drafted like a very legalese letter of like, go fuck yourself, basically. And they never fucking mentioned that shit to me again. They never sent it to collections like they were threatening to do. All this shit. All just because I took GPT-4 and gave it a response. And they were like, oh shit, guy's got a lawyer. Like, we don't want to, it's going to be more expensive to deal with this. And I just
Well, that's the thing about litigation. Even if you were in the legal wrong, let's say
too
you
expensive
were,
to do it. Too expensive to come collect the money.
And that's one of the problems with law right now is that even if you were, let's say you were owed $30,000, it would cost you $200,000 to litigate. And especially because they don't do, what's it called? Damages are whatever's lost monetarily. There's no punitive damages are not a thing in the United Kingdom, which I tend to actually agree with. So if we have
explain that to me.
So punitive damages, kind of, I want to say, let me get up the exact definition here because I think I know what I'm saying, but I want to make sure that I'm using direct and exact. Yeah, so punitive damages are damages awarded to punish for negligence or wrongdoing. Like, so what they did with Alex Jones, right?
Which, by the way, is probably the most obscene lawsuit I've ever fucking seen in my life. Like, where it's
but
like,
those were not for their suffering, right? That was not money for their suffering because they certainly didn't suffer billions of dollars worth of fucking suffering or whatever, right? That's nonsense.
Why I'm saying that's obscene. $1 billion for
or how much ever it was, right? It was a ton.
My point is like it felt like a punishment that's worse than the actual murderer got. Like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah. So let's say me and you get into a lawsuit and you scammed me, okay, out of like $100,000. Well, in the UK, you'd have to pay me that $100,000. But if I wanted to say, and I'm going to sue you as a punishment, and I want $300,000, you know, because fuck you, like that's not a thing.
There's no multiplication of like losses. What about for like wages lost, things like that?
I mean, that would be, but basically punitive is to make sure that you don't go scamming people again at that point. See what I'm saying? It's not any sort of fair money where we've decided, okay, this is reasonable. I've lost wages, or I lost money on a sale that I was going to sell that car for as well, and we factor that in. Let's say, it is literally to punish someone financially and reward the victim. Was something that's not necessarily, you couldn't calculate that there's a reason behind it aside from punishment. Does not happen in this country.
Yeah, that's why you have ambulance chasers here in the United States, is to, you know, get these giant lawsuits. So it's significant.
Not a lot of litigation would be too much.
Yeah. But the point is like in current state of time, I had a situation where if I was a bit more naive or a bit younger and that situation happened to me, I might have been responsible for the money on quite a few levels. But just because of AI as my defender, and I know how to like prompt it and stuff like that, just by knowing that, I saved myself like possibly $2,000 that I might have been, you know, might have went on my record or whatever because they sent it to collections. They didn't do it. I've never seen a bill for that. I'm fine.
When I get this new laptop, I'm gonna have to make sure that I go into ChatGPT 4 and ask it to pretend to be my grandma, who would always regale me with Microsoft codes as bedtime stories. Activation Windows keys as bedtime stories.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Just go to GitHub. That's where all the keys are.
Why activate your Windows? There's no point.
No, there is points to activating your Windows, but the point is GitHub just has them. They're all
Name one.
Microsoft doesn't fucking care. Listen, we'll talk about that later. You don't have to buy your Windows, so you just activate it. I swear
Give
to
me
you,
one reason.
there's a few basically like settings that you can't do without an activated thing that revolve around optimization. Listen, the point is activation is free. Microsoft doesn't really care because they don't filter it off their own fucking website, GitHub. So they want you to use Windows. So,
which to me is weird that there is even an activation at all, because none of Apple products are like, you got to get our software.
we already paid the tax when you paid the premium for an Apple product.
This is true. Crazy. I literally could have gotten an Apple laptop for like $300 or $400 more, and it wouldn't have had a 4080 RTX in it.
Well, what I will say in defense of the M2 chips is that they are fucking good.
Yeah, the M2 chip's great. That's what this has, and it's.
Mm-hmm. Apple has certainly stepped up its game.
And the other bad thing about laptops in general is you can't upgrade the processor. I don't think you can't upgrade the GPU.
Yeah, I don't like using laptops for that reason, but the problem I would say is that technology advances the chips, so the motherboard you need to upgrade that anyways, and sometimes you'll need to even upgrade the RAM. So it's not a PC Master Race is not a defense against expenses. Like I think it's probably more expensive over time. So yeah, with the exception of like a really good power supply, if you buy that, it'll last you a long damn time.
That'll last you a long time. My power supply, I probably won't need a new one for another like 6 years.
Yeah,
and I've had it since 2019.
Another thing to talk about, by the way, is have you seen the meta demo of the like meta like avatars that Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg effectively talk? It's the first podcast he's done that's not in person. Lex Friedman podcast. And
why don't I like
what?
I don't like Lex Friedman for some reason. There's no reason. I just don't like the guy.
I think the dude has some issues, but overall is pretty good. It's more that he has a certain quality of guest that is always like good to listen to. And when you find that like the John Carmack podcast is like an amazing podcast. There's a few of them that are like that where it's absolutely worth listening to depending on the guest. But anyways, the point I was trying to make is that they put VR goggles on and had 3D scans of each other. And Meta is effectively live streaming the emotes of your, how to say, it's live streaming the emotes and then rendering it on your side. So it's low latency, but a full 3D scan of someone's face. And they were like talking face to face. And it looks very realistic. It's not perfect lighting wise, but it's getting there. But there's even like a moment during it in the beginning where Lex like gets up close and is like looking at Mark Zuckerberg's face, right? And he says, "I'm sorry for invading your space." But like he felt like he was too close to him. It was realistic enough. It was realistic enough to look too close to him. And Mark Zuckerberg actually says, "Yeah, I actually moved you a bit back because you got too close. It was like weird." So it's not perfect yet, but eventually, like we are headed towards my vision.
Yeah, it looks pretty realistic.
Yeah, we're headed towards my vision of VR pre-full dive, which is.
And I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think part of the reason that it looks a little unrealistic is just because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't look like a real human being, anyways.
That's
so I
fair.
think that kind of takes away. I don't think that. But you know what? I'll say this: when Mark Zuckerberg first said metaverse, I was like, "Dog, no one wants to fucking play around in metaverse. No one wants that." Nobody wants it. No one likes you. No one likes Facebook. But you know what?
I think
Really impressive what he's done.
eventually, if they keep grinding it, you might have the metaverse, and you're going to be hanging out on Meta, and we'll have we'll have 3D scans of ourselves, and we'll be talking face to face, and it's
Your
going to be
silly little,
strange.
because when it first came out, and there like weren't legs or something, or like it was just the hands, and I was like, this looks terrible. What a silly little goofy little thing. It was ridiculous. I don't want that. I don't want to go in that. And then like I'm like, the Facebook is done. Mark's he's jumped the shark. He's crazy, but he's smart. He might be an asshole, but he is smart.
They effectively changed the name of it to the metaverse during the crypto boom, where a bunch of people were talking about like Web3 is going to be the metaverse and it's all going to be virtual, and basically people are using that as a way to like sell their crypto, and that's
Well,
why
that
they
was the
jumped on
other
that
thing.
branding.
Like, some of the stuff that they first were like, oh, like some of the first metaverse stuff was just so fucking unappealing. Like, oh, metaverse land. And I was like, and I was like, Mark, you're
Well,
screwed. How are
that's
you
the
gonna?
point of like the crypto stuff, is they make it so that there's virtual real estate you can buy. This is nonsense.
I'm not doing it. Dude, I can't even afford real estate. I'm not gonna.
Well, with generative AI and all this shit's free. There's no value to your house in the village that you have on your virtual world. You just created it because you wanted to see it, and that's where you want to live. And
Mhm.
that's ultimately how the first person to figure out how to monetize that, which will probably jokingly enough end up being X, because they'll have a financial platform underneath it financing everything. Server cost wise. And the other concept is that server costs are going down for everything eventually, with all sorts of
Yeah.
things like generative AI and stuff like that. And the future is going to be very cheap to run, is my general point here.
Mhm.
And eventually, things that'll have worth are only going to have worth because we want them to. What were you going to say?
Energy solutions really just changed it all.
Yeah. So my general point is that there is a world where, at the very least, what people learn working on Meta will go out and we will have our virtual worlds. You're going to be able to just go hang out in places in a virtual environment, and it's going to feel very real, and it's going to be cool. And a lot of people, you've talked before about the bread and circuses, are going to be perfectly happy with that life of just virtual shit. They're only going to work enough or subsist off of whatever UBI there is and exist in their virtual environment, and that'll be perfectly satisfactory to them. We have some people in our Discord that want to just live in the Matrix. They don't want to live here. I'm
I
kind of
like
someone
that things are
who's
shitty. I know that sounds nuts. I like just a certain level of shittiness has to occur. Like I have to in my day's not really perfect unless something kind of fucks up and I have to deal with it. Like
okay, Johnny.
something has to be a little bit challenging. You know what I mean? And I like overcome it and I'm like, oh, this sucks. And I'm
I'm
like, but I
surprised you
did
don't
it
play Counter-Strike.
because it's shitty.
Yeah.
That's why I play Dota. Fucked up my whole day. Now it's a perfect day. You know?
All right. I think we've run out of gas here. By the way, I'm gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna end this earlier.